welcome once again to Caleb Blake's Books. Today I have another book review for you, and that is for Carrie by Stephen King. This is the second of Stephen King's books that I have read. I read Salem's Lot back last October, really enjoyed that one a lot, and ever since then I have been wanting to read more Stephen King books. And as of this moment, I already have two more on my shelf ready to read. It was his first book, so I figured that would be interesting. And it was written around the same time as Salem's Lot, you know, first book and his second book. So I figured I would probably enjoy this one as well. And it's one of his most popular books and all that stuff. I didn't expect it to overtake Salem's Lot for me, but I figured I would still enjoy it, and I hoped that I would still enjoy it. And I did enjoy it, but I would actually say this book did overtake Salem's Lot by a fairly significant amount. Even though I really enjoyed Salem's Lot, I had a blast reading Carrie. I loved it so much. It is by far one of my favorite books that I have read so far this year. It started with some good stuff about this book, of which there are several things. First of all, I really love the setup of this book, which I found really interesting, especially given the context of like everything surrounding this book. Because this book deals with things like the opening scene of this book essentially is the main character, Carrie, who I believe is 16 years old at the time of this book, receives her first period, which is basically the inciting incident for everything about this book, and that it's not told specifically if that is the inciting incident for what happens to her in this book necessarily, but it is implied that she then begins to exhibit kind of psychic powers of like telekinesis and things like that, which are kind of brought on by this event. And I think that's a really interesting setup for several reasons. First of all, it's just I think a good setup in terms of the theming and things like that, which I'll get to. And it kind of really caught my attention at first because that's not something I expected going in. And also I thought it was interesting just in the context of when this book came out. You know, this book came out in like the 70s. It's written by a man. You know, that's not subject matter that you would typically associate with a male writer in the 1970s, but I just thought that was interesting also. It's just something that was really unexpected, but it was a really good setup that got me interested because I thought it was really unique and interesting, and I was like, oh, that's something that I haven't really seen before, and so that just kind of got me interested. And Carrie is this character. I felt so bad for Carrie in this book. Carrie is essentially like the person at the school who is like the butt of every joke. Like nobody really likes her. She is consistently made fun of. This inciting incident of her getting her period in the shower room of her high school, surrounded by other girls, leads to her becoming just even more ridiculed by them and things like that. And so that, you know, you feel bad for Carrie in this book, and that makes things really interesting as it goes along. I'll just say that I'm not going to spoil the way things go in this book because I had no idea how this book actually turned out as it went along before I read it, and I don't want to ruin that for anyone. But that makes things really interesting as well. And you know, she's a character that I find very interesting in a lot of ways, and a character that I feel myself empathizing for frequently during this book because you see just how downtrodden she is. And you know that that's not the way she wants to be, and that is shown later in the book, because there's you know, this person comes forward who then treats her with kindness and is like the other big thing in this book is the senior prom, because she, you know, she's a senior in high school. And this person invites her to go to prom, which is then like this very nice thing that is done for her, and you see that she is genuinely like a person who wants to be liked, a person who wants to be accepted, and a person who really just is not. And I thought that was really interesting. I also really enjoyed just the twists and turns of this book. Like there is this sense, like in the first half of this book, it's split into the first half and the second half, where it's like pre-prom and then the prom. And just the first half, you just see how horrible things are for Carrie and all this stuff. and then the second half is the prom, and just the way things build up and it hints at what is to come, I thought was amazing. It is very heavy-handed foreshadowing because you're seeing it's told kind of like an epistolary novel where you get a lot of different perspectives, and you get a lot of the story told through interviews, through news sources, obviously fictional news sources, but still, you get it through a lot of different perspectives that are very unique, which in addition was also a really cool thing that I liked about this book, just the way the story was told. But you can just see like things being hinted at where it's like, oh, this I'm not gonna spoil necessarily, but like just hinting at the way things are gonna go and how bad it's gonna be. Granted, is a little heavy-handed, but I thought it was really well done, and it really made me like very interested in continuing to read the book. And I just thought this was such a page turner. Like, I read this book in a few days. I probably could have read it in even less time than I did. I wasn't able to, because I have other things going on. Obviously, I can't spend all of my time dedicated to reading this book, but I wanted to. And I read it so quickly, and I was so into it, and I always, every time I had to put it down, I would put it down thinking, I can't wait to pick this up again, because I want to see what's coming next. The last major thing that I have to talk about with this book, which I don't have a lot of things necessarily to talk about with this book, but it is a book that I really loved, despite that fact. But these things are all kind of all-encompassing in the book for me, I guess. The last big thing that I want to talk about is the theming in this book, which I thought was amazing. The themes in this book are ones that I find very interesting, especially when they are all working together. You have themes of, obviously, you have the inciting incident of this book, so you have the themes of menstruation and sexuality and pregnancy and things like that. You have themes of religion. Carrie comes from a household where she lives with her mother, who is religious in a, I would say, very corrupt way. And there's some really interesting religious themes in this book, and the themes of like, people who are just kind of beaten down by the people around them, by whether it's like society or whether it's, just other people at school or whatever, and even other things that I'm forgetting at the moment, but they all work together really, really well, and it makes it feel very cohesive thematically and in terms of the plot. Like, everything relates to one another in a way that makes sense and that works, and I thought that was amazing. And I just love a lot of the theming in this book in general. Like, as I was reading the first half of this book, which is where the theming I would say is the heaviest, I was just thinking, man, I wish I could just like spend a few hours just writing a big like essay about the themes in this book and really analyzing it and digging into it, because I think it's super interesting. But yeah, that's the big thing that really drew me into this book, I would say, initially, and then everything else, like I said, it's all very cohesive to me. And so when you have all this other stuff that relates to all of that, then you get drawn into that as well. So yeah, just great stuff all around with this book. And there's other things I liked about it as well. I loved the way the characters were written. I loved their interaction. The characters are memorable, all kinds of things. I loved the dynamic that Carrie had with her mother, much as I hated Carrie's mother in this book. Those interactions I always thought were fascinating, and just all kinds of things about this book were amazingly done, in my opinion. As far as things that I didn't like about this book, there is one thing I would say that isn't even really a problem, but it's something that I would have liked to see more of, which is the themes. Because the first half of this book, I would say, is very, very heavy with the themes. Not that the second half doesn't also relate to them, because it does. But I felt like it didn't dive into it as much as I would have liked in the second half. And I think that the book might have even worked a little better for me if it had really kind of brought all of that together in a way like it did in the first half of the book. And granted, like I said, it still does have things to do with those themes. There's still the themes of, the menstruation thing. There's still the themes of religion and all these different things. And those all still do come into play very strongly, but I feel like it didn't resonate with me the same way in the back half of the book. However, the back half of the book is where all just the stuff happens, and it's super interesting. So it's not like I wasn't engaged in the book in the back half, but I just would have liked a little bit more of the themes to be a little more at the forefront, like they were, I think, in the first half of the book. But that's pretty much all the big things I have to say about this book. I absolutely loved Carrie. I had a great time reading it. I thought it was amazing and thought-provoking, and just really just really drew me in a lot. Like, every time I was reading it, I was so invested in it, and I always wanted to know what's happening next. It was one that I thought was really interesting just to think about, like I said, with the themes and everything, which are themes that I really enjoy and think are really interesting. And it's one that, like, I have not done any like long form analysis video essay type videos on this channel, which is something I might like to do someday. But if I ever do decide to do one of those videos, I predict I will probably do one on Carrie, because there's a lot here that I think that I would be interested in digging into. And that even is, to me, is even more amazing because this is a short book. It's not even 300 pages long. It's like 280 or something like that. But there's just so much packed into that, that I just thought it was amazing. I loved this book a lot, in case you can't tell. As far as a rating, I would give Carrie, I'd give it a 9.5 out of 10. The only thing bringing it down for me is the fact that I would have liked to see the themes a little more prominent in the back half, but otherwise I was totally into it. I loved my time with it. I was just so into it, and I just had a great time with Carrie. It was horrifying in all of the ways that I love. It was just gripping and interesting, and just all kinds of things. I just really liked it, and I can see why it got as popular as it is, and kind of catapulted Stephen King into being, the author that he is now. I especially like the double whammy of this and Salem's Lot, which are two amazing books back to back. Not to mention all the other ones that he released soon after that I haven't read yet, but I've heard are great. So that pretty much wraps up my thoughts on this book. If you have read Carrie before, let me know what you thought of it. How do you think it compares with the rest of King's work? Like I said, this is only the second book of his that I've read, so as I read more, I'm sure that, my opinion on it might shift a little bit, or maybe it'll remain pretty, like, high at the top for me, or things like that. But let me know how you think it compares to his other work, and what you think of it in general, and all that stuff. And that's pretty much it for this video, so thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.